Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And let me take this opportunity to welcome you to this important discussion that we are going to have. I initially had prepared all the background lighting for my in preparation for this presentation, so that I would put up my face and everybody could see. And then ESCOM happened, and so we are sitting in darkness, but I've managed to charge all my devices. So anticipating a smooth transition to this important discussion that we're going to have. Let me first take this opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Willie Chinyamurindi. I work for the University of Hare within the Department of Business Management. I also have worked previously with the University of Hare in a unit called the Research Niche Area. This has seen us do some projects with local community groups, particularly local economic development projects. And in so doing these projects and also in reading newspapers and commentary, I came across our presenter for today. And I am so excited to be the one who is merely facilitating on two fronts that I'm excited. First, the topic itself is a very interesting topic and timely, particularly in the context that we're living in, but also because of the speaker, who is a seasoned professional, an economist by training, a researcher, and currently working as the project manager for investments at the Eastern Cape Socio-Economic Consultative Council. Ladies and gentlemen, our speaker holds a master's degree in economics, which makes this so timely because one of the things that I really think
You are muted, Prof.
sorry about that. Yeah, thank you for that. So that we can also become better in ideals of us becoming this developmental state that we like to talk about. Without wasting any more time, I would like to introduce you to Ndzwana Makaula, who I am so excited to hear his engagement and approach to this topic before us. Just as some rules that we're going to be engaged in, I will ask our speaker to have some time to get the ball rolling, to introduce to us the topic. Thereafter, engage in some discussion with the speaker, and then we can also open it up to the colleagues that are in attendance to also gauge their views and consideration around this particular topic. I also acknowledge each and everybody who is here today in this important discussion. I see some of my colleagues from as far as the Gordon Institute of Business Science. We see some colleagues who I've last seen in a long time ago, but the power of social media in us marketing this talk has actually managed to get everybody connected. So welcome everyone. Make your notes, and I give over to you, our speaker, and I will give you 10 minutes just to launch us into the topic. If you have anything else outside the 10 minutes, save it up, because I'll give you some time right at the end to also tie in those discussions. And I'm so happy that some of the people who are here are not just economists, but also budding economics students who are looking forward to your presentation. I yield over to you, sir.
All right, thank you. Am I audible? Can you hear me, Prof?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. I'll make an assumption that everybody else can hear me. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Prof, for the introduction. I prepared slides to spark the conversation more than anything. And the slides we're going to take up to like 15 minutes. Since you give me 10 minutes, I'll make it just above 10 minutes so that I can do justice to the presentation. And I've switched my video on, and I'll gladly and request to switch it off just to make sure that the transmission is not interrupted. And I'll be flagging in my slides. Talking about load shedding, I think we are planning to be load shedded on our side at 2 o'clock, but I hope we'll be done by then. But if not, I trust everyone that is on this platform on this topic. So like when you are listening to your favorite song and it comes to an abrupt stop, I would request you to continue humming the song because this topic is really for us all. As I am now flighting my slides, can they show on your side?
Yes, I can see them. Maybe, yes, perfect.
Great. There's a little bit of background noise. I'll request that whoever that is, they must mute their mic. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you really once more for this opportunity. I must say that what sparked this webinar, ECSECC has got the webinars that they often host, and I was dragged into this webinar because of an article I wrote last year. In fact, before it was an article, I wrote for an engagement at the Parliamentary Budget Office around about August 2021. Then I've since written an article to it. And thereafter, there was a lot of talk. Basic income grant became a very big subject in the country. I think second to the state capture, sometimes even more than that. So I will borrow from what I've written. I will also make use of other information that I've come across with, and that is the recently published expert panel study, which was commissioned by the Social Development, as well as the work that was currently being done at NEDLEC, which took for quite some time. Then thereafter, I hope we will definitely have an engagement. So this is how the presentation is structured. I'll be speaking a bit faster so that we can save time. So section A of this presentation really summarizes what I wrote last year, as I have earlier referred to. The purpose of this slide is to give a background and introduction on basically what is basic income grant. I hope people won't be confused, because it has been confusing. On the media, you hear talk about SRD, which is also the terminology that is being used for this. SRD stands for Social Relief Distress, which, because of it, the basic income grant gets to be paid. But for the purposes of today's conversation, I would request that we regard those as we'll use those words interchangeably. It won't dilute any information you want to put across. So basically, in a nutshell, these are the founding principles of what is a social service or social security is all about as we know it today in South Africa. The Atlantic Charter of 1941, the African Claims of 1943, and the Freedom Charter, together with our South African Constitution of 1995-1996. I request that you read those for those who are not aware, but those are the founding principles on why, in the first place, we've got what is called social security or social grant, social welfare, all those. Right. Under the question that says, is basic income grant needed? And I want to put the following as consideration for us to gravitate towards answering that question. I want us to consider, one, the decline in the economy performance of South Africa. If we follow our history, ever since the 1970s, the economy of our country started to decline. And up until 1994, because unemployment rate did not only start in 1994, already when there was handover, there was already more than 10% to 15% unemployment rate in South Africa. Global financial crisis didn't spare us any calamity. In 2008, we did see the meltdown again, our economy was taken aback. Okay, coronavirus did as well as most of you would know this. It's much spoken about statistics. The second consideration I want to put across is the alienation of the human spirit. This terminology, we used it quite a lot at the Eastern Cape Planning Commission a few years back. And it basically means pre-1994, a lot of people were oppressed. It was stressful. A lot of people were taken away their identity. And post-1994, people have lost their dignity. People have been stressed, have been living under an oppressive government. And for that reason, the Planning Commission had believed that that was an alienation of the human spirit. And for that reason, a conscientization would need a conscientization program in order to restore the human dignity. And this conscientization will rely on a growing and inclusive economy, because social cohesion alone is meaningless if people are poor, unemployed, and systematically excluded. The third consideration I want to make is jobless economy. I think this one is in line with also what I've said on number one, but we're just putting it numbers that we have had a jobless economy. In as much as we've seen a 2.8 on average on economic growth between 1994 and 2008, it has not been able to absorb the number of people needing employment. And this country, less than 8 million jobs were created between 1994 and 2019. That is 25 years. So an unemployment rate, as I've said, has never been less than 15% since 1994. If we hold constant the COVID-19 variable, unemployment rate was sitting at 29.1% in 2019, and it has never been less than 16%. The fourth consideration I want us to take note of is the scrapping out of planning ill discipline. By this, I referred to the fact that for the past 26 years of democracy, this country has had up to 5 macro or grand plans to grow the economy of this country, from RDP, GIAS, GISA, NGP, NDP, and we've got now the economic reconstruction and recovery plans. I mean, without having examined the wins or the losses of a previous plan, we're jumping to the next one. That's fundamentally wrong when it comes to the disciplines of planning. We're going to rehash on that point a little bit later. Now, in answer to the question, I want us to take the following considerations again. The basic income grant is needed, and it is 18 years late. Why? Because the first report titled Transforming the Present and Protecting the Future was presented to the Committee of Inquiry into a Comprehensive System of Social Security for South Africa in 2002. A Department of Social Development was responsible for that. And I'm also highlighting that the grant recipients in this country have increased from 3 million in 1995 to 18 million in 2020-2021. And I want us to consider that the basic income grant must be increased from this 350 proposed to 1,268. And it's because this 350 is merely 59% of the poverty line of 585. So really, you can't change your life with 350, not do anything meaningful in your life. Then the third consideration I want to submit that the BIG, which is basic income grant, can help prevent violent crimes and unrest, which we have seen in the first week of July of last year. The violent crimes and looting in South Africa were not a sign of temporarily angry people, but a demonstration of deep-seated feelings of inadequacy amongst millions of South African people. These inadequacies are driven by low and intolerable levels of socio-economic conditions in the country, poor transformation, and use of policies that continue to marginalize our people. This slide is covering only the last set of recommendations, because I know some of you are asking yourself, so Ndzwana, how are we going to afford this? We've got debt to GDP, that is a lot. Our country basically does not have money. In these 3-4 points, I'm trying to respond to that question. Number one, financing of social security system. I'm saying it can be within the same realm of resourcing, such as road accident fund, compensation for occupation injuries and diseases, and National Skills Fund, which are financed through a proportion of a fuel levies and paid by employers and skills development levy, respectively. We all pay that if you are a motorist and if you're an employer. The second one is a strong oversight by Parliamentary Budget Office. They've got that responsibility to guide the conversation within the Parliament and its work, the planning and budgeting process by National Treasury. That office is charged with that responsibility. The third one is fiscal consolidation. A sound fiscal security will need to be adequately resourced, and for that reason, reduction of budget deficit and containment of debt to GDP is very much important. And I also submit that for this reason, the Parliament needs, and the South African large and the government support evaluation of expansionary fiscal contraction in the context of South Africa in order to implement it without exacerbating the already problematic austerity measures. The SA government needs to evaluate the expansionary fiscal contraction so as to test the nature of causality relationship between growth and consolidation, and such outcomes must inform the approach followed by the National Treasury. The last point, which needs no explanation, is reducing irregular expenditure. If the Auditor General reports are anything to go by, you would know that we can't use a leaking bucket to fill a bottomless tank. The money that goes to fruitless expenditure, to irregular expenditure, let's work around it and save. We might realize we've got a little bit more money than actually often claim. Then the few slides, colleagues, under section B is just the panel report on social relief distress by the Department of Social Development, because it has been on the news recently. I said, let me pull it through and let me summarize it for people who haven't seen that report. The long and short of it is that that department, together with SASSA, they've appointed a service provider to conduct a rapid assessment of implementation of COVID-19 social relief distress. Basically, they relied on secondary data information and the information that was collected by SASSA during the application. Then they've analyzed the nature of that data, the number of applicants, and their gender, and where they are located. And then they made recommendations based on what people felt was the contribution of the BIG in their own lives. These two graphs that you see here, it's just signifying the nature of people that have applied. The top one, this one right here, all I want to highlight is that this group between 20 years to 34 years made 61% of all the applications. And under this one, what I would like you to note is that the low application submitted by women were at their peak of reproductive ages. If I were to summarize that, between this age, 20 years and 34 years, you can see that the line for the female is declining. The simple reason for that is because at this age, females are at their peak of their reproductive age, meaning they've got babies, they're most probably getting a child support grant. And the prerequisite for the BIG is that you must not be earning any other grant for you to qualify for this one, so they could not apply. These tables here, they were just showing the state of people's in their household of the recipient before the lockdown and after the lockdown. As you can see the difference, unemployed was at 57%, and a lot of people have lost their job if you compare to this one. Employed as a casual worker, here lost their jobs is at 32%. There are no casual workers at all. So majority of these people were in the informal employment, and they account for majority of that 2 million people that lost their jobs. I'm going to leave it at that, and we can come back to it during the question session. Now, according to provinces, here the rate of approval differs in different ages, and notably higher in teenagers and lower in mid-20s, and lower approval rate coincided with peak reproductive ages, as I've alluded earlier. This is the Eastern Cape, which is relatively lower than most of other provinces. Right, and Okay, when asked the question of whether the BIG makes positive difference in their personal life, overwhelmingly, 88% they said yes of the people that participated in the online surveys. Right, from the panel of discussion, here are the major findings and conclusions. That the special COVID-19 grant is mostly used for purchasing food, as reported by 93% of the survey. A total of 9 million people applied. Only 6 million were approved, and 4 million, 16% approved, and 4 million were men and 2 million were women. And most women could not apply because of they're already on a child support grant. And metros, they seem to have a lot of access to the internet, and they managed to apply. 82% were Black Africans, and grant applications were very high in Gauteng, KZN, and very low in Eastern Cape at 13%. But Eastern Cape is the poorest province compared to these two, I wonder. Right, the grant makes an important dent on poverty in order to reduce the high levels of poverty in female-headed households. Recipient of child support grant benefit must be disregarded when determining eligibility for the basic income grant. Well, subject for discussion. Right, this is the last slide for section 2, and just basically on the actual submissions and recommendation put forward by the panel. Then they did so looking at these triple challenges in South Africa, which is poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Under poverty, they say the grant appears to have a direct positive impact on poverty by means of combating hunger and ensuring food security. On unemployment, it seems to have a mixed impact on unemployment. On one hand, the grant will not on its own help create jobs, which is negative. On the other hand, the 350 will activate labor force, allow people to offer themselves for employment. As some of you would know, the cost of finding job is quite very high. Then the last one, the grant seems to have no impact on reducing inequality. On the funding models that are being proposed, the panel strongly recommended combination of taxes funding model, that is income tax plus value-added tax, together with foreign direct investment. I wonder if we can get foreign direct investment if we can't get them for growing the economy. Income tax is not sufficient, so since there is not enough people paying tax. A phased approach is recommended as the economy grows and the taxation must be reviewed. Prof, please indicate how much time I have left. And
let's do this because I think this is core.
Sure.
Just finish those reports that you are going through.
Sure.
And then straight after the reports, then we can start to engage.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll just jump to the major findings and conclusions. Other than that, we'll revisit any other thing that I've left. The panel also said that the BIG is too little at 350 and it should be 1,300, and that it includes everyone between age 16 and 59, because for those who are not receiving disability grant, because if you are between those ages and you don't have a disability, there's no grant for you unless you've got a baby. Social support is a constitutional right, as according to Section 27, which is basic shelter, basic nutrition, and healthcare. I mean, it's also there on the Freedom Charter. Right. Then I want to finalize by this Section C. Please note that comprehensive social security and retirement reform was a project driven by NEDLEC. NEDLEC is the National Development, Economic, and Labor Council. Now, the background of this work, I must say that it emanates from that study I referred to earlier, which was commissioned by the Department of Social Development in 2002. So here's the flow and the background of that work. The task team was resuscitated in 2014 to engage on this comprehensive social security. 2016, Cabinet accepted the report and review of the white paper of 1997, prepared by Professor Taylor. The Minister of Social Development presented this paper in 2012 to the NEDLEC and ECSECC on the 2016, a MENCO task team was consequently established to enable social partners at NEDLEC on this policy proposal. This task team by the MENCO produced a draft NEDLEC report, which was signed off by the ECSECC in 2019. The report identified key agreements and areas for further debate and research, and feasibility for basic income grant was one of the areas for further research. Now, then the task team established a research reference group, which appointed a service provider in the name of Deloitte to do feasibility in this feasibility of implementing the basic income grant. The research report was finalized in February 2021. Thereafter, government tabled an updated green paper on comprehensive social security and retirement reform on the 6th May 2021 for engagement. The reason why I did not leave out the dates, I want all of us to see the sequence of engagement at NEDLEC now. And I must say that this process is outside what the current social development was doing with the current panel report. And it's also outside another discussions that were made. I counted like 4 institutions that were doing studies and commissioning reports on the basic income grant in the same national development space. Now, here are the findings of that work that was done at NEDLEC. As social partners and constituencies, which are made up of business, organized labor, community, and obviously government at NEDLEC, they all supported the establishment of basic income grant for these ages. National discussion should be initiated to consider the BIG along other important national social initiatives such as NHI and higher education funding. Now, Deloitte, which was commissioned by the research reference group at NEDLEC, presents a database showing that the basic income grant would cost anywhere between 17 billion and 554 billion, depending on eligibility and rules. And 500 billion if we agree to that 1.2 per month, and 17 billion if we agree to 350. And then another institution that conducted this research was Institute for Economic Justice. Then they found out that the BIG would cost the country pay 157 billion or 519 billion based on this amount per month, or this amount per month, which is 585 rand, which is our lower band poverty line. All these institutions that I've read and they've done research on the BIG have recommended taxation as a main funding model for the basic income grant. That was the last slide for me, Chair. And these are some of the questions that are keep on popping, which we are boggling our minds with, such as, is basic income grant sustainable? What about the fiscal multipliers of the social relief distress grant? Why are we looking at it as a consumption? Can we afford it, or can we afford not to have it? What about the poor tax collection? And what about the illicit tax revenue? Chair, that marks the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. I'll be guided by questions.
Thank you, Mr. Makaula, for that presentation, and thank you for just giving us something to start the debate on at. I want to also, before we go into the discussion, acknowledge everyone who is here. I see some colleagues with tags written honorable member, so I without mixing up the portfolios and the offices that you belong to, I'm so happy that we have politicians amongst in our midst to try and also decipher some of the things that were presented here, and everyone really to say welcome to this presentation. So mine is to then get you to get the ball rolling. I will open it up. You just raise your hand and then we acknowledge you, give us an introduction, who you are, and then you can give your comment or question, whatever it is. Mine is to appreciate, like I said, as a practitioner, and I've got great respect for this area of study, I want to appreciate your presentation and personal reflection on some of these studies that you have shown us in the latter part of the presentation. But to then ask, like in your own circles as a group of practitioners, what has been the implications of some of these reports to the day-to-day work that you do in a province such as ours, where we acknowledge that, we have challenges on the ground. That's one. And then the next one, which I hope you can also take it on board, you spoke about the challenges of jumping from one policy to another as something that is also affecting us all particularly on the African continent. You will find when one government leader gets in, they reverse what the previous one has done. And, the whole cycle of shuffling and jumping from, you called it beautifully, jumping from one policy to the other, without appearing anti whatever political affiliation you may have. Could you give us a critique of what have been some of the successful policies that could have been abandoned, that maybe we should have maintained a path on to try and help our people, particularly our people, because behind all of this, this 350 or this amount are men and women who are looking forward to this amount of money every month to sustain their well-being. So those are the two ones from me. And thereafter, after your brief response, I'll then ask the members to also tell us what they think. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Appreciate. And on your two questions, implementation of the reports on day-to-day and what could be the consequences of such work, having so many policies. Well, firstly, that is a clear demonstration of lack of integration. You see, South Africa is said, and it is on paper, a unitary state, but when on practice, I've come to witness that it's not 100% unitary. You do find one at a national level, one thing is being done, but when you go at a provincial level, you find something else being done. To even believe that provinces sometimes do not feed off from what is the national agenda of growth and development. So that is a problem that is come out, the lack of integration in planning as well as executing some plan. There are government departments, or in every government department, there is a unit that is designated for integrated government integration, where it ought to see this through. But I can claim right now that we are not necessarily winning that race, and it's something that needs to be tightened up, because we would find that one province or one department is still informed by a previous development plan. On the other side, you find a department having another different plan. And again, I called it planning ill discipline. If I may make last example on it, is that why is it that we would have a 30-year-long plan, let's say, assuming that 2030 is still far, not around the corner, a 2030 growth and development plan, but other subsidiary plans like a master infrastructure plan would be a 2035 plan. Then you look into the special development plan would be 2045, and others are 2050. Why are we not sticking into a one-time horizon, so that when you've got a master plan, other plans are subsidiary, and then they link into just one a long-term plan? And I can also argue that Vision 2030 was too short. We still need another 2050 plan, because a lot has changed, population has increased, we would need more resources to get going. Then my response to the second question, which is what are other policies? My critique on these policies and other policies that we've let go. Firstly, there are a lot of programs that were implemented just to see people through. I will make an example of the EPWP, which is Expanded Public Works Program. It got off to a very good start. Many colleagues who are in the public service will know about that program. And a lot of money was pumped into it. The goal for it was to give people jobs and get something to do by making sure that we've got clean roads, minor plumbing work, painting, and so on and so forth, depending on the space. But I do also believe that that program is not meeting its target. If it targeted to employ 150,000 people in a financial year, it will employ 100,000 people or just less than that. It's not meeting its youth ratio, have so many young people, have so many people living with disability employed. There is a problem of an uptake with that program, or there is a problem with how it's being executed. It's something that I think we collectively need to have a conversation on. The last example I want to make in that is companies were often given text windows, those that employ a certain threshold of young people in their own companies. I mean, without having gauged much on how that program has gone, or it's a report that I haven't bumped into, but I would like us to sit around the table and we review all those programs, rather than continuously producing something new without giving a much needed feedback on one project and see if we drop it and we move with a new one. So I just want to give those two examples, Prof, so that we can give colleagues an opportunity. Otherwise, there's a long list of policies that I feel we should have carried them through. Thank you.
Thank you for those responses, Mr. Makaula. So we're going to go to the first round of commentary, and I can see some hands already. I'll go first with Barry. I apologize if I don't call you by your correct designate or your preference of how you want to be introduced. We will work at that next time to find out who exactly is here. I see two hands so far. The first is Barry Mokel, and then also the second is that of our colleague at the Nelson Mandela University in the Economics Department, Professor Saiden Mishi. So Barry, good afternoon, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Prof. And thank you very much to Mr. Makaula. That's a really informative presentation, and I actually like the candidness, the critical reflection and candidness that he presented. The thoroughness also, I think, and given the time constraint that he had. I wanted to ask you, and you touched on it, it's actually part of the last input you gave, Ndzwana, around the policy coherence and in lack of policy coherence around potentially, I think the lack of policy coherence, I'm not sure, maybe you know it better. Do you think that policy coherence is challenged by two factors? I think the first one, maybe just to get your reflections on the conceptualization or framing of the challenge and the solutions to unemployment as part of a bigger challenge around the debate around the basic income grant. How do we deal with poverty, systemic unemployment, the biases, the phrase that the research has shown, I think research by Leslie Powell and the chair for youth unemployment at NMU has shown that there's just not enough jobs, but also racial and class inequalities are still driving the underlying biases to who gets employed and who can't find employment amongst youth in particular. And then the second area that I'd like to get your thoughts on is, do you think there's sufficient ideological or paradigmatic alignment in government thinking on the basic income grant? And I like the way that you kind of like unpack the institutional thinking, the disjuncture between the planning and that. But I think there's also, the state is not always a unitary entity and agency, like you said, the unitary state in terms of provinces at scale and so forth and national, but also within departments, there's a contestation. Treasury's got a strong paradigmatic approach that it's driving. Part of it is fiscal consolidation, but there are other centers, the way that, and I just wanted to say the last point, I really like the way you position this thing around the scale, the state as a multi-scale, but it's not a unitary block, but the positioning of Treasury in this debate, and then you have Department of Labor, you've got the kind of NEDLAC, which is also not really in the state, but it's got the state juncture between the state and other players who have different diverse positions on this. So I would like to hear your reflections on that. And thank you again. I really like the way you succinctly, given your time limitations, gave us this presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Barry, for that. Two great questions that you've asked there. Barry acknowledges also the great work that some of our colleagues at Nelson Mandela University are doing. I can confirm to you, Mr. Makaula, the HOD for the economics department of Nelson Mandela University is next, and he wants to give a comment or ask a question. Professor Mishi, welcome. Let's hear from you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Chinyamurindi, and also Mr. Makaula for that presentation. I think we really need more of this. I think I really concur with you in terms of how you have really put across the issues that we have. So we have big issues here. One is that if you look at the issue of data, we don't have data, and government departments are not sharing information. If you look, social protection is really required. We really know that people really need that social protection. But when COVID-19, for example, hit, we had those long queues even on post offices and like, because we don't have a really proper social security register that is really up to date. That is why we saw that there were some errors here and some errors here. No, we apologize for that. That is not good. People that were not supposed to receive the grant have received the grant and so forth. So there is really no good understanding of who actually need would actually deserve this grant, for example, when it came to the COVID-19 grant. Then the second thing is that because of the lack of that proper data, those in the informal sector, remember they were receiving, for example, food hampers. Now you don't, yes, you need food, but you don't create a wealth out of what? Out of a food hamper. You eat, and the time that people were receiving food hampers and not actually selling sweets and vegetables on the streets, they were failing to get income and money, but they were getting food to eat. But that lost time is never going to be to be recovered. Why? It's because we lacked the complete registry that could actually account to say, how do we do then vertical and horizontal expansion of social security protection, because we have received this shock. So we really urgently need social protection stress testing immediately to understand how can we really respond when we have a shock like COVID-19. We were not prepared for that. It has actually been shown. Then secondly is that government would want to play a big brother, in terms of creating jobs. Government is not going to create all the jobs that are required. That is the problem. Government want to be the creator of jobs, but government should not really just be focusing on the creating of jobs. It's about the environment. Yes, government should do something, but government is not going to solve the whole unemployment problem. So that is a big thing. Then I wanted also to inquire in terms of the funding of the BIG. I think you talked about taxation, and many studies have mentioned taxation. And one of them was, you also mentioned FDI. I just wanted to understand how that comes into, because it has got knock-on effects. How investors would perceive. If we are saying FDI can really fund this, how is it going to really map into that? And again, our tax, in terms of collection, yes, there's a lot that can need to be done there. But in terms of the tax rates and whatnot, I believe that we are at that level where we can't really tax the economy to any glory. We actually really at the highest level. So that is actually, but we can deal with collection. And I think the current commissioner is actually doing very great work. I think he is very innovative. If you see the effort that you've made, it's quite a lot. Then I think just concluding now.
Yeah, let's hold those ones. And you can come back for the second round. I was going to send you a private message to say, please be economical, Prof.
No problem.
Let's come back to the second round. Mr. Makaula, two excellent contributions from Barry, who I love the second point on the ideological paradigmatic alignment of the basic income grant and the position of Treasury, and also an excellent contribution as well from Professor Mishi. How do you respond to these contributions?
Thank you so much, Prof. And thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Barry, and my colleague at ECSECC, and thank you, Mishi, my former colleague and a friend, a respected economist, that one. Thank you, bro. Appreciate. Number one, on the conceptualization of unemployment and the systematic and the racial context that comes with it. Well, I don't think we have conceptualized it enough to deal with it. If how we're dealing with it is a result of how we've conceptualized it or continue to conceptualize it as a country, I really don't think. I think therefore our conceptualization leaves a lot to be desired. And the understanding of employment, for instance, I sometimes disagree with some other plans to sit down and have an employment plan. I think you don't necessarily, that should not be your first point of departure. A first point of departure should be a well-oiled economy. Then employment, they will just come up as we go. So we can't plan necessarily to increase employment. We can plan to have a very well-oiled economy that is got industrials, that is inclusive, and small businesses have got the space to partake. I've written my thoughts on that in another article that we need to have provinces regulating their own businesses in a province. And by that, I mean other provinces must not be allowed to be exceedingly well off at an expense of other provinces. If a province is on agriculture, it must be on agriculture. If another one is processing, they must do that. Then if others are exporting, they must do that. It's unacceptable that we take a lot of maize from the Eastern Cape to the Free State. Then after Free State, it gets to be exported. Why can't we do that as a agricultural potential province as we are? You go to big businesses. Why are we allowing other people? Why have we got policies that allow people or some other companies to be excessively well off at the expense of other people? The economy is at a stage where we need to share to the little that we have in the table. Other people must not earn so much, yet there's someone who does not earn anything. I'll make a quick example. If you've got Checkers, why are we allowing Checkers, whom predominantly were a supermarket which sold uncooked food? The supermarket are now selling cooked food. They've got mini restaurant. They've now got bottle store, which are liquor store, as in their outlet. Why are we allowing just one center to service people? Until when we're going to allow small businesses from the townships to have a share? Can't you have a bottle store? I have a restaurant, then I sell uncooked food. We can keep on throwing these ideas, but a conceptualization of what employment should be, it does not start in seeing how the number of people employed. It starts by having a very inclusive economy and a very inclusive business practice. On your second question, you spoke about the issue of ideology, the sufficient alignment of things that government do. I just want to quickly make an example of, I attended a summit, Barry, in preparation for the first South African Job Summit. Basically, the Job Summit was a national summit. Most of you would know. It was in, I think, Galaga State, if I'm not mistaken. We sat there, got commissions, got thematic areas. The goal is to increase employment, among other things. But before the summit itself, we sat into the working groups. They were convened by the National Department of Small Business Development and other departments. The reason I'm mentioning that is that when they were mentioning thematic areas to which they think, or we think we're going to grow employment in this country, they were listed manufacturing, they were listing tourism, then they've listed other sectors. I was so shocked to find out that we did not have an agriculture as a sector in which we can drive employment. There I was representing an Eastern Cape. I asked the chairperson that, whose jobs are we thinking of? To what potential and strength of our country are we thinking of in deciding what areas can we create employment? I am shocked that we don't put agriculture, which other provinces have got a huge advantage of. Needless to say, it was considered as one area. But I'm making that example to highlight the point that the issue of misalignment or disequilibriums in how we engage in these areas is just shocking. You can't think as if you don't have a province that is good, that is coastal, that is big on agriculture, that is big on tourism, and then a plan is crafted as such. I'm moving quickly on to Prof. Mishi. Mishi made a lot of very valuable suggestion and comments and adds on into today's discussion. But I just want to quickly respond to his second and the last question that he made. On the issue of data, I agree with you 100%. The delay in why the implementation of the decoders, if you know the conversation of moving from analog into digital, which is led by the Department of Communication and Telemedia. It was agreed that indigent register or indigent households must be given free decoders. But I tell you now, there isn't any credible indigent register in most parts of the country, and that has caused a delay in driving that point forward. That is just one area where the issues of data is very big. Another thing I'll tell you right now, I'm yet to see the issues of business intelligence and BI. How I wish all of us would know, I know this information resides somewhere, that can't we have a BI report on the public servants? How many public servants there are in the Eastern Cape? I'm sure we all know that. And of that number, or in the country, and then of that number, how many are going to be retiring in the next 2 years or this year? We must know that. And that is going to tell us about the open vacancies we're going to have at the end of this financial year and at the end of the next financial year. If that information we can use it daily in our own planning cycles, and when we decide on how many vacancies we would have, it will be of great assistance and of great use. So I cannot overemphasize the importance of having credible data. Prof. Mishi, on the issue of the FDIs, like I said, my commentary earlier on, that I wonder we are going to receive much foreign direct investment to inject into the basic income grant, whereas we did not get so much when we wanted to grow the economy. Well, I'm yet to see that. Any economist in this meeting perhaps can advise and guide us on that one, but I'm really not going to hold my breath much for that, because I mean, we've been there, we've seen the report, and we've seen the plans. But where I'm agreeing it with mostly, which also covered on the knock-on effects we were talking about, one of the questions I've asked at the end, my last slide, was, why are we looking at the basic income grant only as a consumption? Yes, it is a consumption by government. However, why are we not concerning ourselves about the fiscal multipliers of it? Because when someone gets given money, as you have seen, the research by the panel of experts, over 90% of the money is being spent on food. Now we need to ask ourselves a question: whose food is being purchased by this government money? It costs plus minus 3 billion, by the way, that is being paid to the people that have applied for the basic income grant. It costs 3 billion. So why are we not asking ourselves whose food is being bought, and whose transport is being used, and whose education is being paid for? Where is the ultimate destination of this money? If we're concerned about such, we will take care of the economic multipliers of this money so that we can reinvest the money, so that we cannot have money that is spent in the Eastern Cape, for an example, does not change more than 5 hands, it leaves the province. For my last example, Prof, is that Minister Zulu issued a report last year that of the grant recipients in the province, 70% of them are young people, and 3 billion is being paid in the Eastern Cape every month towards grant recipients. So where does that money go? But I'll tell you right now, that money does not change hands more than 5 times, then it leaves the province. Because to whatever we consume, it does not reside within the province, as I've alluded earlier. I think we can discuss that one further. I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Prof.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that. And I was just smiling when you mentioned food, because somebody even said what type of food is being bought, because the nutritionist and the behavioral side will actually say that perhaps the basic income grant automatically sets some of our people to suffer from the diseases that we are seeing now, because the food is not nutritious, and the classification of the type of food. And I saw, is it Zodwa, Veleman clapping their hands when you were providing the distinction between if one opens up a business that does something not competing with the other but complementary. So I was happy to see that. Colleagues, I'm going to open it for a second round of commentary or questions to this very insightful discussion that we are having so far. Anybody who would like to be acknowledged, and then we can maybe take 2 or 3, and then Mr. Makaula will then have his closing remarks. Okay, Prof. Mishi, did you have that one question that you wanted to finish off your statement with? And then we can also check if there's anyone else after you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Yes, and also the response that Makaula has given. One thing also is that implementation of any scheme seem to just go big from the word go. There isn't, that clear process of, pilot assess to see the effectiveness of that particular project or idea, then now scale up. We want to go big because we want to touch each and every part of the country, which is good because you don't want to leave anyone behind. But actually, practice and science does not tell us that we need to pilot and then assess. And that is where data actually is vital to get that information and then share the experience even across provinces and whatnot. But that does not seem to happen. All the different schemes that we see is just going big, and then they don't really make an impact. Then we wonder why. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof. Mishi. Prof, are you still there? I'm seeing a hand. Can we?
Yeah, sorry about that. Zanele, is it Zanele?
Yes, it is. Still.
Okay. Zanele, please go ahead. I'm looking forward to your comment or question.
Thank you, Chairperson. My name is Zanele Silo. I'm the COO of ECSECC. And I really want to firstly say I appreciate the presentation by Mr. Makaula. It really, I think, for us is a thought-provoking engagement. I mean, we are at the final stages of even our own planning, but I think as we even finalize our own, research priorities, these engagements really influence our thought process as we go forward. So it's quite welcomed, and I really want to appreciate it. Chair, I think for me, I only have 2, I will call it basic questions because they're not necessarily academic questions, but I think they are really, as I said, when the presenter was giving his feedback around, I think going back to the first slide, it got me thinking. I mean, you had a bold statement there saying that the BIG is 18 years overdue and should be implemented immediately. So one got to thinking to say, when you look into the trajectory of developing states, which South Africa is one of them, and I think our recent history tells us we now have to contend with the speedy advancement at that of technology, an advancement in social ethics that really is underscored by universalism. So it calls for like this constant reflection of where we are in the drive towards a reflection on what is a developmental state, by the way. And so when you highlighted that statement and that theme, I said to myself, now how do we align that bold statement to the evolution and the development of what you would call a developmental state, or I even dare say the movement towards a welfare state? What are the implications for those two elements? And again, I think, as I said, I'm just asking high-level questions that got my mind thinking. And then I think the second question, Chairperson, just for me would be, what is the main trust? Okay, what is the main outcome? What do we want to achieve or see being achieved by the implementation of this social cushion, for lack of better words? Organic economic cushion, I think, as was earlier indicated. Are we wanting to then say, in the long term, we want to see a shift or a reduction of structural poverty, which is a long-term poverty, as a result of, obviously, people's and personal social circumstances? Or are we wanting to target in the interim or in the midterm the struggle against conjunctural poverty that talks to, how ordinarily self-sustaining humans are thrown into the throes of poverty due to crisis circumstances or unforeseen circumstances? So what do we want to see at the tail end as a impact of the BIG in the context of our own history, one, but our current state within South Africa? Thank you, Chairperson. Those were just my 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Silo. I really appreciate the comments that you've given, and also your presence here. It's wonderful to see senior executives attending to be part of these platforms of engagement. Mr. Makaula, I am cognizant that we are left with 10 minutes. So you now need to land this plane now, and please land it nicely. We started off nicely. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Prof. I wonder how am I going to land it if you are the pilot of this aircraft, but nevertheless, I'll try my best. Thank you so much, Ms. Silo, COO, for that comment and the questions. And I do think that we need more conversations and more engagements on this topic and other topics as well. So I'm really open to that. And I mean, the panel and the group of our colleagues who are in research space, there's a lot of them in this call. So to also assist ECSECC and many other institutions going forward. So we can obviously get around the table and see how do we see those processes going forward. But on the two very important and very difficult questions you've asked, the first one on the issues of developmental state and in the context of BIG and South Africa. Firstly, I must say that the fact that we are a developmental state, developmental stateness of any state, of any economy, it's not a permanent label that is given to a country. An economy does get to a point where it's no longer going to be classified 100% as a developmental state. So there are a lot of variables that we can look at to determine all that. But we are, as a country, as a developmental state, so is our policies and our approach to policies and our affiliation to other global development institutions. Having said that, in the name of being a developmental state, it does not mean we must not get things done. And being a developmental state doesn't mean other things, they're still in the pipeline, they're still in development, and then they don't even get to be realized and be forgotten about. So that's my critique to some of the things that I think we don't get done. Yes, indeed, if a first report was submitted to government in 2002, we can't say in 2022 we have been taken off the ground, feasibility was done, resources were set aside to see that process going. So I really don't think we must be okay with that individually and collectively. And I want, and I invite you for a minute to forget about who your employer is or others are self-employed. Just what you think, because it is calling on our conscience that influence how we then influence policy. It is unacceptable. Even if our organizations as departments are doing it and our government is doing it, we must keep on reminding ourselves that it is unacceptable. Then on the second point, which is on a very, very important question, which I did not even find, I must be honest, any answer that alludes or attempts to answer your question directly, which says, so what? What is the main purpose and what is the end goal of paying the basic income grant? I don't think I was convinced by what I read on the reports about painting the exit strategy, if you like, of this basic income grant. It's still here and there, but perhaps let's take a step back. Social welfare, I mean, historians might correct me, I invite them to correct me on this one. On their conceptualization, as I've also alluded earlier about the Atlantic Charter, in some parts of the world, they were as a result of the disasters, the World War, where people were now left at a state of not being able to be sufficient. Then governments will come together, give a social welfare or social security to people that have gone through those processes. And a growing economy and social grant, they don't coexist. If you've got so many grants, it means the economy is not growing. They don't coexist. They cannot live under one roof. They've been kept sustainable for all these decades because the economies have not managed to live and be successful. Because any social support, especially a grant like this one, needs to push and drive itself into non-existence if we know what we are doing. But if we talk of 3 million grant recipients in 1995-96, and we talk 80 million grant recipients in 2021, that is grossly unacceptable. We shouldn't be okay with that. So if you ask me that, what would be the exit plan? It is a fast-growing economy where all small businesses are given a chance to create their own employment. We mustn't allow we must not only specialize on the tertiary economy as our province is. Our primary and secondary economy, they don't even constitute 10% of the categorization of our provincial economy. Other people are doing things for us. We just eat, we dress, we drive cars. We don't produce these things ourselves. And it's not in our psyche to believe that we can actually make these things ourselves. We talk on cell phones, we drink water, we don't know who fetched this water. We've got new TVs, we've got cars. Who does these things? So that's what we should be concerned more about. And we do these things, there will be more people employed when you drive this conversation going forward. So that is my submission and my response. I do feel like that in my closing, Prof, because we've got a few minutes left, we must stick to time. The conversation is ongoing. Any researcher in this platform, I've seen quite a lot. I mean, you are more than welcome that we can come up together, close some other gap in this topic. If you want us to collaborate on any study, there are a lot of experienced researchers that we can come together and keep the conversation going. And I know the organizers of this platform, they're working very hard. So thank you for all the effort you've made and the support that is shown by the ECSECC colleagues and the colleagues from outside. I say a lot of my family members, because I promised to buy them data if they do join and stay the whole session. So let's talk after this. So from me, I thank you so much. Unless there's something else you want me to add, Prof, thanks to yourself as well. A lot of people were saying, we know Prof Willie, we know when I was posting my thing, he's such a good guy. I think those people were right. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you for that, Mr. Makaula. I've got a query here. There are colleagues who are asking about the presentation. Yes, the presentation will be forwarded. Even for the past webinars, all presentations are on the information center of the ECSECC website. So you're not going to miss out. Everything is there. Mine is then to also thank you for the dedication and time that you've shown. I've been reading your work, and I'm really, really appreciative that you are igniting discussion around these important concepts. I would also strongly encourage everyone that we form networks and partnerships around us to find ways in which we can improve the situation and ultimately for our people, ultimately in the challenges that we are facing. Colleagues, I want to thank you very much for attending this lunchtime webinar. You will appreciate, I hope, another one can be organized as we tackle these topical issues that are affecting us all. Please stay safe, and thank you for attending. And we are ending right at the appointed time that we said we're going to end, which is at 13:45. So
sorry,
I'll take that. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry about that. I'm seeing a quick question on the chat from Duma, and he says, how do you take this engagement to the level of the district and local municipality? Fortunately, ECSECC, I would answer in that context, does a lot of work in the Eastern Cape at any government level. I mean, through strat plan, advisory, research and analysis. So, I mean, either or, it could be a municipality invite or ECSECC's initiative to do so. And together with Office of the Premier, which sees through the development of IDPs, integrated development plans. So this work can be taken at any given time to any district municipality. But I've got senior colleagues from ECSECC here who can add into Duma's question about us taking this work to municipalities. So that is that. And just on that, just to put you on the spotlight, Prof, because we need to be concrete. You spoke about us forming a network out of this. I'm accepting that challenge, and I'm throwing it to the organizers of this platform, that because of this engagement and today's engagement, one of the takeaways was that we must form a network, a committee or a team, whatever you call it. Don't put too much structures into it. Don't put a lot of portfolios. Just the structure where we see through research of particular topics like this, and they will see how they locate us in conversation going forward, and how we can collaborate in all our different institutions. Like I said, some people here are not necessarily working for government. They work for other institutions. A lot can come out of this. This is not a talk shop. So please, colleagues, kindly send all your views on the email that was in the poster where you were doing your RSVP. Just say, in light of today's conversation, I think ABCD, or I would like to participate in this network that is going to come out of this. So thank you, Prof. Thanks once more, colleagues. Appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you very much, colleagues, for attending. Please enjoy the rest of the day, and thank you for your dedication and time. And I think Barry, final word, great input. Let's collaborate, and I totally agree with you. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you. Appreciate. Enjoy, colleagues. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.